system by default. But if you would prefer to join in using your phone, you can select the telephone button in the audio pane, and the dial-in information will be displayed. You will have the opportunity to submit questions to today's presenter by typing them into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect them and address them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Today's webinar is presented to you by Drivewise and Premier Circle Club partner of the California Trucking Association. And today's speaker is Mark Pitcher, Director of Sales Strategy and Operations for Drivewise. Today's session will focus on exclusive California-focused data from the Drivewise Analytics Service, how the service can help your fleet save money, how it can integrate with ELDs and in-cab devices, and how it can future-proof your fleet. Now I will go ahead and hand the controls over to Mark Pitcher. Mark?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to visit with us today and learn a little bit more about Drivewise and our long-anticipated expansion into California. We're very happy to be here. Thank you, Lupita, for helping us put this presentation together, and of course to the California Trucking Association for bringing you all on board and giving us this opportunity. Joining me on the line today, I also have John Elliott. John is the CEO of Load One.
Doing great. Thank you, Mark.
Good. Could you take a second just to tell us a little bit about yourself and Load One?
Sure. Load One, we're an expedited carrier, so we offer everything from sprinter vans, straight trucks, dry van tractor trailers, and current-size flatbeds. We operate right around 400 units. We're based out of Detroit, Michigan, but run nationwide, all the regular route expedite type work.
Very good. Well, welcome, and thanks so much for taking the time to be with us today. Also on the line, we have Brad Gerard. Brad is Director of Information Services for J.B. Hunt. Brad, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Mark.
Our pleasure. Thank you for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and J.B. Hunt?
Yeah, so J.B. Hunt's based out of Lowell, Arkansas. Our size, we've got roughly 15,000 tractors. We've got 100,000 trailing units, approximately 23,000 drivers. So we've got 4 divisions. We've got our dedicated contract services, which will do whatever the customer needs, and then our intermodal segment, along with our traditional over-the-road, and then we've also got an ICS brokerage.
Very good. Well, thanks for joining us. And we have an interesting mix of panelists here. J.B. Hunt being a fairly large carrier with multiple operations, and Load One in the neighborhood of 400 trucks, more of a medium-sized fleet. So thanks again, gentlemen. We're looking forward to hearing what you have to say. How I thought I would start this morning is a brief introduction to Drivewise and where we came from. So we have a parent company, or a sister company, if you will, called Intelligent Imaging Systems. And Intelligent Imaging Systems has been in the business of providing imaging equipment and way station scale back-end services for about 12 or 13 years now. So ISS provides things such as license plate readers. They have some infrared camera products that read the heat on brakes, bearings, and axles, for example. So we've built some deep relationships with commercial law enforcement around the country, and particularly in California. In fact, we've been working with the California Department of Transportation and the Highway Patrol for a number of years now. And those of you who operate in and around Northern California, you'll probably be aware of the Cordelia I-80 station that was revamped a couple of years ago. We were the lead technical contractor, or rather, Intelligent Imaging Systems was the lead technical contractor on that project, which of course is award-winning and is really quite the facility. It's really quite amazing. But from that relationship with law enforcement, really came a question, and that was, is there a different way to do bypass? And our answer, of course, was yes. We think there is. Modern technology, modern communication methods, GPS. We did think there was a way to provide bypass services outside of the traditional transponder model. So back in 2012, DriveWise was launched between us and our law enforcement agencies, and of course the fleets that we endeavor to serve. And for those of you who've been following news about DriveWise, over the last couple of years, we've seen some pretty rapid growth. We have about 41 participating states right now, and we managed to get all 41 of those states in just under 5 years. So it's been quite a ride, an awful lot of fun, and awful lot of friendships and great business relationships built over that period of time. We're proud of the work we do, of course. We've won a number of awards over the years, and the quality of our service and certainly the quality of our customer service after the sale is something that we're quite proud of, and I think something that both John and Brad are very familiar with. So what is DriveWise Pre-Clear? Well, it is now the nation's largest way station bypass service. So how does it differ? It's integrated into existing ELDs and mobile devices. The concept here is that there's a certain investment that you as fleets make in equipment and technology in the ELD mandate that's even becoming more apparent. So we've created a product that's designed to take advantage of the investment you've made in those devices by providing the service right there on the ELD or on a mobile device in the cab. And for those of you who already use some form of bypass service, you know this, not having to pull in simply saves time and money, increases productivity, improves, driver happiness, etc. So, that's kind of a proven. For those of you who don't use a transponder-based service now, there are ways that we can show you how it will save you time, money, and we'll be getting into that just a little bit later in the presentation. The point here is, it keeps drivers on the main line, keeps things moving smoothly, and anytime you don't have to pull in, of course, is a bonus for everyone involved in the operation. Brad, over the years, J.B. Hunt has certainly embraced technology to improve operations. I mean, you're one of the leaders in the field there. So what do you and your colleagues there look for when you're evaluating a new tool like DriveWise Pre-Clear? Like why pick a product like this?
Yeah, sure. So, having a technology background, I think transportation is ripe for technology. And, when you look at the technology that's being introduced to our drivers inside the cab, that's changing day to day. And where drivers may or may not have been exposed to this kind of technology, now their job depends on it. And then you're going to see more of that with the ELD mandate coming. But, when we go and look at technologies before we put it in front of our drivers, it's really two things. And, ease of use has got to be there, and that's back to, drivers, it's got to be seamless workflow for them, right? And then it's got to work. It's got to do what we say it's going to do. And so, those are the biggest things. And really, like I said, as we see technology just explode for our drivers, that ease of use is key, and I think that's something DriveWise has nailed. So,
right. Well, John, Brad and you and everyone on the pennies a mile can really have a huge impact. So, what does it mean to you to keep your trucks rolling? What does it mean to the company? What does it mean for drivers?
Well, I think, if you look at the technology and the fact that it lets us roll, everybody is paid on a per mile basis for the most part. No one's paid to pull in the scales. No one is compensated for that time. So everything that we're able to do to minimize our non-productivity time, obviously it drops straight to our bottom line. Even more so now with the ELD mandate, time is literally money. If you look at us as a company, again, we do expedited work. Our industry is very tariff-driven. Most of the major care providers are all within pennies of what they charge each other. So service and your reliability and time commitment are major factors in that. And those are the little apart from our competitors. And it's critical when, 95% of the time we're going to a plant that's shut down or a facility that's going to shut down. So cutting 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes off transit makes all the difference in the world to that kind of customer.
Right. Good point. Very good point. Let's talk a little bit about coverage now. So, as I said, we're the nation's largest waste station bypass service by a fairly large factor. We have over 600 locations in 41 states as of today. And that's a lot of blue on this map, and of course, we love seeing that. A few little holes to fill in, but we're getting there, and of course, we're in negotiations with all states all the time. We actually have a dedicated state team who have relationships with Department of Transportation and law enforcement entities around the country. And of course, we've got some new things. In addition to adding states, we also add sites because we're a GPS-enabled system, so it's GPS and cellular networks using connectivity from the cab. So we don't have to install poles in the ground, so it's fairly easy for us to add sites. We launched in Ohio a couple of months ago with just a couple of test sites. We're adding new sites there now. North Carolina, we're going up to about 16 sites over the next 60 days or so. Washington has never had a full-scale bypass service before. We started with 2 test sites and are increasing to about 7 over the next couple of months. So lots of growth even within states. And what's interesting about the service is we're not restricted to fixed waste station locations. We can provide bypass services and data on activity at fixed sites, but also at those temporary locations on the roadside or at rest stops where commercial law enforcement officers may set up portable scales, et cetera. So we're very flexible. And about a quarter of our sites are those mobile sites, with the rest being fixed sites. And of course, the big news and the reason we're all on the line today is what's happening in California. So, there was an RFP about 7 months ago or so. We responded to that RFP, and of course, services in California. This was obviously a big win for us, and we argue a big win for everyone in trucking, because it's always nice to have an opportunity to choose what services to use. So in California, all 37 locations will be ours. We already have about 12 of them set up, so we're actually ahead of schedule in terms of getting things activated. I think as of today, there's 12, and all 37 will be up and running by about the 17th to 20th of July. So pretty exciting for us, and pretty exciting for those of you who have operations in California. So of course, the service itself, as we mentioned earlier, is integrated right into your device in the cab. So it basically acts as the transponder. No transponder required anymore for bypass services. That means less transponder inventory to manage. Activations of Snap, it's really a software as a service based product. So activating trucks through your service provider is a matter of point and click. Activated, sold, new trucks come on. It's a fairly simple, much more manageable process. And of course, with transponders, no additional fees for lost or stolen devices. And those of you who've used the transponder-based services certainly know that can be a headache. We also know of fleets out there who have had transponders sitting on the shelf that they're paying for because they haven't returned them, or or they're damaged, or they needed to be cleaned. So we're just getting out of the hardware business, and looking for a way to provide this service on those devices. And our partner network continues to grow. We launched the service with PeopleNet about 3 years ago, OmniTrack shortly thereafter, and the other partners have come on over the last couple of years. And of course, for mobile devices, it's available on iPhones and available on Android. And the network continues to grow. So for those of you who are not currently on one of our partner networks, stay tuned, and we will be able to get you information on when we hope to be able to provide the service on other devices. Bypasses and notifications at waste stations that we cover, we also provide notifications to the driver and data on activity to the fleet for every location in the country. So we have geofenced all waste stations in the country. So what does this mean? Well, you get a notification from any lane, so there's no worry about whether you're in the right-hand lane or not, because it's a GPS fence that is activating the device and the bypass. And we found over time that having notifications at every location helps reduce violations from missed waste station stops. New drivers coming on board with driver turnover, people on unfamiliar routes, This is just a nice additional feature that's not available from a transponder-based service. And we found that drivers and operations managers really like this feature. And of course, we're collecting data on all of those encounters with weigh stations as well. And as a subscriber, all that information is available to you as a fleet these notifications at these sites, I think they're working for you. What have drivers been saying? What have you been finding about the addition of notifications at even non-DriveWise sites? You on mute, John?
No, I'm sorry. Okay.
Sorry.
Can you say the question again, Mark? I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure. That's all right. We're just talking about notifications. So the addition of notifications at non-DriveWise sites as well, what that might mean for you and your drivers.
Yeah, I think it gave them clarity. Because one of the things that is frustrating for anybody is when you're not sure if you're cleared, not cleared, is that scale part of it? So the fact that they get that notification, again, it increases their trust in the product and the reliability of the product to the driver. And that there's nothing worse than a driver who has technology, and unfortunately, technology is quirky at times. But it drops real fast when they don't have a confidence in the reliability of the product. And that notification really helps to increase that reliability and thus the driver engagement and acceptance of it.
Right. And Brad, I mean, you finding the same thing? Your drivers noticing that as well?
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, the other thing there is just from the safety stance of a non-DriveWise site, the driver gets a heads up 2 miles in advance. He knows he needs to be making his lane change, and he knows he's going to have to pull in, right? So I think, drivers love that. They love the heads up, and they like being told early. And so, but from a safety stance, that's a big benefit there, a big call out to those non-DriveWise sites.
Right. Well, with that in mind, why don't we show the gang on the phone here how it works. Here's a typical setup. I wish every weigh station location looked this simple, but this will give you an idea of how it functions. So your vehicle approaches the weigh station, and as Brad said, at about the 2 mile mark, there is an initial notification. So up on the screen, and there's also an audible chime, which is unique to DriveWise and is easily understood by the driver, to let them know that they are approaching a weigh station and that they're about 2 miles out. They carry on down the road, and at about the 1 mile mark, there's another geofence and then another notification, just letting them know that they're a mile out. And this is approximately where the negotiation of data between the truck, our network, and law enforcement's network takes place. And that's our secret sauce. So what happens here is a very small amount of data goes from the device in the cab to our network. Our network then communicates with law enforcement's database against a set of screening rules. So it's the same sort of screening rules everyone's already familiar with if you're using a bypass service, and things like your safety score and tax payment and registration, that sort of thing. All information that's already available to law enforcement. And that information is screened against, is compared against this set of screening rules. And all things being equal, a notification comes back to the truck, letting the driver know that it's over. So this is all automatic. There's no interaction with the officers in the scale house, with the exception of a screen that they can see what's happening. There's no ability to override it. There's basically sort of a Monte Carlo simulation roll of the dice to determine what your pull-in rate is going to be based on your safety score and other factors. In the event that you are randomly chosen to pull in to the weigh station, the driver gets a simple notification that says to pull in. Once the driver has either pulled in or bypassed, the system simply resets itself and prepares itself for the next weigh station encounter. So fairly simple, and the interface, of course, with the drivers is pretty easy to understand. It's designed to be intuitive. It's designed to replicate the road signs that they're already used to seeing outside of the cab. The audible signals that are given to the drivers are unique to DriveWise and recognizable. Sort of a happy chime for a bypass and a slightly downbeat chime for a pull-in, that sort of thing. So once drivers get they can certainly catch on quite quickly, which reduces training time, of course, and improves acceptance amongst drivers. And then, in terms of what drivers think about bypass in general, we've had a study back in 2015 of about 600 drivers, and we found some surprising things when we asked them about bypass in particular. So, what do truck drivers really want? So company-paid bypass service was really high on the list. Look at where it sits here, compared to things like sign-on bonuses. That's pretty impressive, and it means that drivers, of course, we all know that we're faced with a driver shortage, and retention and recruitment is a very, very important part of what we're doing every day. So company-paid bypass service is one of those things that drivers are looking for. In fact, 65% of the drivers we surveyed said that they're more likely to stay with you if you have a company-paid way station bypass service, and this includes both owner-operator fleets as well as company driver fleets. Those owner-operator choose to add this as a benefit have higher retention and better recruitment opportunities with drivers. So that's certainly something to consider when you're looking at a bypass service as well. And finally, the three times more likely to choose a job at your company if you do provide that service. So some interesting stats there that show that if you're not using a service, it's not just about bypasses and the money you might save there, but it's also about what your drivers might be thinking about your operation and their happiness while they're working there. So John, we've talked about this before, the concept of driver morale and what it means for retention and recruitment. What do your new drivers expect when they join Load One? Are they seeing, is this making a difference? Are you using this when you're recruiting drivers?
Yeah, I think drivers, obviously, you hear about money a lot, but I think benefits and the overall package are really a bigger thing to drivers. Offering the pass, I think, has just been one more thing that we're able to round out our benefits package, and it's an item that makes good sense, not only for the drivers and to give that to them on a recruiting retention basis, but it makes good economical sense for the company as well. So it's pretty easy, a win-win. I think it's like a lot of technology. Once drivers have it and they become accustomed to it, they sure don't want to give it up. And leaving us to go to a competitor, that might be one of the things that they might have to give up.
Right. And Brad, we're aware that J.B. Hunt spends a lot of time and a lot of energy nurturing its relationships with its existing drivers, and of course making its new drivers feel welcome and part of the team. Are you finding the same thing? Has bypass in general become a part of the whole package when you're looking at new drivers or looking to keep existing drivers?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And John touched on it earlier when he talked about utilization for drivers and drivers. And so, with introducing a technology such as this, we're able to, on average, our drivers are seeing 4 more bypasses per month than they were usually seeing. So, which means making more money, right? They're running more miles. And so, absolutely, it plays into what, we call our driver experience, and we do have a team dedicated to that. But DriveWise is a big piece of that.
All right. Well, we're happy to hear it and glad to help. So, Load One, John, you've been using DriveWise now for almost a year, I think, and I just want to get a sense here of kind of the big picture, the 30,000-foot view. When you were looking at us in terms of evaluating it, how it's been working out for you, what has using the service overall meant for your operation?
It was a really easy ROI, which is always great from a management perspective, right out the gate. We had held off and we're not on a bypass before we integrated with our satellite provider, and you guys rolled that out. One of the things we've struggled, or I think a lot of businesses do, there's a ton of great technology out there. Integration is really the big ticket. When you look at a truck, when we had satellite systems in there, scanners, toll, transponders, cameras, you start strapping. I don't know how we have room for freight left. by the time we put all the safety equipment on there and that. And so when the integration became available, we jumped all over it because we really think that is a great thing. A lot of our fleet, a lot of our owner-operators were already using a service, either Drivewise or another service, like on their phones and that. So for them, the minute we introduced it, it was obviously a cost savings because they no longer had to pay for it. Every time you avoid a scale, obviously it's time, hassle, money. Everyone saves. But the only drawback we had, we give our drivers a clean level 1. So we probably had a few guys that were disappointed they didn't get pulled into scales quite as often, but I think they'd much rather get all those green lights and all those nice arrows and avoid them altogether.
Right. So if I unpack what you said there just a little bit, you're saying that you're making an investment in this device, and of course everyone soon has to make some sort of investment in the device. So you're trying to maximize your ROI on that device as a whole by putting more products and services on it that benefit your drivers. Is that what I'm hearing?
Exactly. The more things that we can integrate and leverage off of that single platform was obviously a win for us. Like you touched on earlier, that's less hardware we have sitting on a shelf. That's one less component to manage. Again, it makes the driver's life easier. It's one less thing that we have to equip in the truck, or move from one truck to another, or get back from an owner-operator if they leave the company. It's just, again, there's so many moving pieces that what's really nice about this was it was almost as simple as a flip of a switch and that. And it was a relatively seamless process. Driver training was really minimal to none to get this thing up and running. I mean, it's just kind of a no-brainer, I'd say it.
Right. All right. Well, thank you for that. So Brad, I get the feeling that we've probably met your expectations, but maybe again, sort of 50,000-foot view, and not just from your perspective in your department, but other departments, because you're closely intertwined with all of them. What's the big picture? How has this impacted operations?
Yeah, I think, look at those numbers. The proof's in the numbers, right? 115,000 bypasses per month, and 40%. I touched on that a little bit. Our drivers, on average, are getting 4 more bypasses in a month than they were, and so think about that. In that, from a safety stance, we talked about the non-Drivewise sites and knowing that they've got to be ready to pull in. Well, they're in this case, which we've seen better coverage with Drivewise. We're getting and less having to merge in, and it's hard to put a number on those, but just from a safety stance, our drivers are no longer having to pull in where they did before. And then back to the utilization, and so overall very pleased. And I would just echo when you look at what our options are, and you talk about a hardware transponder, and we had a whole team of folks dedicated to just managing that and ordering that, and making sure from day one that when we activate a truck, we have all the equipment needed, so the driver has everything there. And so that's no longer the case. We're able to redirect those folks to other things in the company now that we're controlling this through software. And 100% of our fleet was equipped with ELDs, so for us, pretty easy just to push some software out and activate this once we had proof that, we were going to see these numbers. But, yeah, overall, I think it's met our expectations and even exceeded. So.
And Brad, in addition to the waste station bypass, you've been part of a pilot that we did, which is just recently rolled out, which are these driver safety notifications. So again, looking at the device in the cab, we see that as a platform. Pre-Clear is a waste station bypass service. It's where we started. But of course, when you have a clean screen that's usable in the cab, there are other things you can do. And we understand that you folks successfully tested the high rollover notifications. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what we're trying to do there?
Yeah, so, really just, like you said, we've got a screen in the cab where why not leverage the technology, and anywhere we can push a notification to our driver to alert them of an upcoming, high rollover zone, why not do that? So we turn that on, and again, back to the ease of the use for the drivers, there's no interaction here, right? It's just popping an alert message, making them aware, and so high rollovers, well, that's an easy no-brainer for us, right?
Right. Yeah, there are other things, of course, we're looking at in the future that we could add to the platform. So high rollover zone notifications is kind of first on the list, but there are things like high accident zones, potentially steep grades, an advanced warning of a steep grade, sharp curves, etc. So really anywhere where there's a warning roadside sign that can be brought into the cab, we think that that certainly adds some value and adds some benefit to the to the product. And that certainly would be safer for the drivers and the fleets. And we're not looking to replace, a navigation app that has certain features like this, but certainly the test for the high rollover zone notifications was very successful, and we've been able to roll it out. So it's now available on certain ELDs and mobile devices in about 19 states, which is pretty cool. So I'd like to talk a little bit about our data-driven approach here at the service. We're able to give trucks bypasses, but we're also collecting a tremendous amount of information that's just never been available before. When you geofence, 1,200 locations around the country, and you capture data on all of the trucks that are visiting those locations, you start to learn some pretty amazing things. The idea here is on a monthly basis, the fleet who uses DriveWise, obviously gets information on their bypass activity, the locations of those bypasses, etc. But you also get a data set that includes all of your other activity. Which states are costing you the most in terms of stops? Which states do you visit more than others? Which stations are open? Which stations are closed, etc. So there's a lot of data here that companies like J.B. Hunt are using to compare with other data that they collect. And we think that's pretty valuable, and we've learned so much in the last few years just by collecting this information. And again, it's information that's just never been available before. We're able, for example, to measure the truck and pulled into a station. So when you get your monthly report or when you get your analytics report, you'll see very clearly that truck 1678 was pulled in at this way station in Michigan and spent 6.5 minutes there. And that's pretty cool. And of course, those 6.5 minutes all add up over the course of 50 trucks or 100 trucks or 1,000 trucks. And that's just the information that's pretty valuable. And in fact, returning to California and our rollout there, just because we weren't providing bypasses in California doesn't mean that we haven't been collecting an awful lot of data over the last 4 years. And interestingly enough, California way station stop times are pretty high. And here's some examples. So what's interesting about this is that the national average for all way stations across the country is about 5 minutes and 43 seconds. Now, some of those stops are, 30 seconds because they're simply a roll through, a deceleration event, a roll back to highway speed. But some of those stops are an hour or 45 minutes or however long that full inspection might take. When we do these calculations, we remove time for suspected hours of service compliance stops at rest stops, things like that. So these are numbers that are really based on way stations where true delays are taking place. So pretty, California is, well, I guess we know how overworked some of those way stations are. So this probably doesn't come as a surprise to those of you on the line who operate in California. In terms of frequency of visits, this is a national number that I thought you might find interesting. So for a carrier that operates really just within California, for example, or within an individual state, on average, that truck will visit way stations about 39 times. So, more than once a working day. And that's a pretty impressive stat on its own, in terms of working within an individual state. Most of you who are on the line who travel outside the state and around the country, it's 81 a month. So the average truck in the country right now that runs over the road visits weigh stations, encounters weigh stations 81 times a month. Again, this is just information that hasn't been available, because here's the thing. Inspection reports don't equal pull-ins. You know, not every pull-in results in an inspection. So the only way to know how many times you're getting pulled in is to be able to use a service like this to track it. And what we know about your fleets, you know, is that no truck is average, but here's an example. So here's an outlier, but we do see this in a number of fleets around the country. So this one truck, you know, working for a Midwest-based carrier, was hauling windows for a manufacturer, and they had a dedicated route, like a lot of you on the line do, working for a dedicated customer. And this truck was passing the same darned weigh station multiple times a day, because it was making multiple deliveries. Well, weigh station bypass, to get 14 bypasses per day, and as a result, saved about 21 hours a month. What's interesting about this example is that it resulted in additional deliveries, which resulted in reduced costs, which resulted in increased revenue. So a really interesting example, and these examples can be found, you know, in a lot of fleets. And the reality is that, you know, your fleet's not average either, right? And we really don't want you to guess. Like, we're not interested in estimating what you can do. We're interested in the facts. You know, what does it really mean to use a service like DriveWise Preclear? So what I'm going to show you now is just some examples of analytics, which is a pre-sale tool for ELD customers. So this is a way for you to test the service and receive data on the bypasses you would have received as if you were a subscriber. It runs in the background. It's not, there's no driver notifications, there's no interaction on the part of the driver, it's just a data collection tool. But it runs in the background as if we had activated DriveWise on that truck. You can see the detail on each and every truck. And what we do when you run this for about 30 days is we'll come in with our ELD partner support and sit down with you and show you exactly what those results were. And this is an example of what you might see. This is an actual company that ran analytics, and we just made it anonymous here. But so this is a fairly large fleet, about 1,800 trucks, and this is the summary sheet, like the top sheet. So this was run a little while ago, but they had almost 77,000 weigh station visits during this 30-day period. They were pulled in 28,600 times and lost over 1,200 hours in a single month. So again, information that was never available before, which suddenly we're able to capture. When we do these analytics reports for you, we show you all of the detail. So where were you visiting? So this map would typically represent that 76,000 number, right? So here's the heat map of where you visited. Here's the states where you had encounters with weigh stations. The locations where you got pulled in. Again, we're recording those pull-ins. So where you visit is not always where you're getting pulled in. We've had fleets say to us, hey, your service looks great. Give us a call when you have, you know, Nebraska, because they're domiciled in Nebraska. Well, they don't just travel in Nebraska. So we run the analytics for them. We show them where they're having their encounters with weigh stations and show them where they're getting pulled in most often. And John, I know, you know, with analytics, you were effectively able to see what your bypass results would be before you decided to subscribe. And I think you mentioned earlier that, you know, it was an important part of that process. Can you just quickly describe how that went for you when you were dealing with the sales, with the DriveWise representative and your ELD partner representative, and what that process looked like for you?
Well, again, very similar to what you just described. You know, they knew that we were interested. They had told us that they had this ability available to run the data over a period of time and come back to us. You know, a lot of vendors and that love to come in and tell you what they think they can do for you, what their estimated savings are, what their estimated results will be in a perfect world and all that, and you kind of take the number and scratch it in half, I guess. But here it was a case where we were able to actually get the data up front and see exactly what would happen to our fleet and apply it. So we were able to make our business decision based off of, you know, 100% facts and not have to do guesstimates, not take a supplier's number and try to, you know, figuring that'd be fluffed up. What would the reality be, or what could we hope for? And it's nice to be able to make a business decision with that kind of data up front. And honestly, it made it very easy for us to make that decision and implement pretty quick.
Right. And that was, you use that analytics for a sort of a pre-purchase decision. Brad, in your case, you did that as well, and we had some pretty big numbers to show you when we ran the analytics on all of those. Interesting about you is you also use the data post-sale, so your monthly subscription data to make decisions, based on terminal activity and based on new states and new sites coming on. Can you give us a kind of brief outline of how you're using data afterwards to maximize the use of this product?
Yeah, and I mean, the analytics was huge in just when we first set out with DriveWise too. And you guys have come a long way to bring all these states on board. But I will just say that, we went through the same process initially, and the analytics gave us the ability to strategically turn on accounts and realize that, maybe our West Coast operations aren't going to benefit, right now. And so without those analytics, maybe we could have gotten there, but it would have taken us a lot longer, and we would have had some guesses go into that. Without it, I think we zeroed in where it made sense, and you saw, 40% increases in bypasses. So I think we got the answer right there with where we got it turned on. We are looking at using the analytics now, with bringing on California. Doesn't come immediately. So we do want to see the numbers behind the reporting to make sure that it's good for our operation there, and we don't want to do anything that's going to slow them down. But I expect similar results there as well. So making decisions to turn it on is a lot easier when you can see the data beforehand and kind of see what your future looks like. But from the reporting ongoing, now that we've got it turned on, and you show, this heat map that you're showing, we're able to have better reporting around, say a particular state, we start seeing more pull-ins of what's going on there, and we can have conversations to understand, what the officials are doing in that one state, because, we expect on average to see, a constant, but every now and then a state bubbles to the top. And so we're able to have some more conversations that we didn't have in the past, and that's because of this report.
Right. All right. Well, listen, that kind of wraps up the bulk of the presentation here, but I wanted to open up you who are online. There's a question section. You can type in your question in the dialog box, and I'll be able to answer them for you. Or you can direct your questions to me or to our guests, John and Brad. I have a couple questions here now, which I'll get into. Dean asked, I see Oregon is not listed yet. I guess he was looking at the map. How long before Oregon comes on board? Good question. We obviously get those questions about individual states all the time. Our state team is constantly negotiating with states over access to their locations. Oregon's interesting. They've never had a transponder-based. Well, they have their own transponder-based service, but they haven't used the large one we're all familiar with. We are in active negotiations with them, though, and they are quite interested. We don't publicly announce sort of until it's done what the time frame is, but we're pretty optimistic, and they've been quite good. As you can see when you look at our map, we're very interested in capturing all of the I-5 corridor, and Washington was a big one for us before either. So getting Washington, now having California, Oregon's got to look at that and say, hey, we might as well be efficient too. And let's remember the reason why law enforcement provides bypass in the first place. Budgets are tight. State police, departments of transportation, they can't afford really to inspect every truck, and nor should they. So the concept here is, to allow trucks based on certain criteria to legally bypass so that they can concentrate on those fleets and those trucks that really need the attention. It's better for everyone. It's really, a better use of resources. So stay tuned. We do send out. You can sign up for our newsletter. We send out regular announcements on new sites and new states coming on board, and we'd be happy to keep you updated. A question from Alan. He was sort of asking directly how this compares to pre-pass. The main, the three main points really here are no transponder. That's kind of key, and I think you heard I heard Brad talk about that just a little. There are more states and more sites because we're GPS enabled, because we use technology, cellular technology and connectivity from the device. We just have more locations and we're growing faster. And finally, a point to talk to your ELD partner about, or your ELD provider about, we're usually less expensive in almost all cases. And there's a reason for that. We don't have any hardware to take care of. So you'll find when you do your pricing with your ELD provider that you'll be pleasantly surprised by the overall cost of the product compared to a transponder-based product. All right. Well, that concludes the presentation for today. I'd like to invite those of you on the line who've liked what you heard and who are interested to contact me. My email's on the bottom here. Getting signed up on Analytics is a sort of a painless experience. There's no cost. It is designed to give you the data you need to make a decision. Now that California is up and running, you're going to get some pretty cool information to give you at the end of the analytics period will be pretty interesting. So by all means, feel free to contact me, and we will get you set up on Analytics, and you can see for yourself what a difference it might make to your operations. I want to take a moment to thank you, John, very much for joining us, and Brad. We sure appreciate your time. We also appreciate your business, which is important. Thanks again to Lapita for putting this together, to the California Trucking Association for making it all possible. My name is Mark Pitcher. I look forward to seeing you all in the future. Thanks very much. Take care.
Thank you, Mark. And Brad and John for your presentation, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Like I mentioned earlier, a recording will be available today, so you can access it by going to our website, caltrucks.org, and searching the Premier Circle Club Partners page, and this would be uploaded on the DriveWise page. On behalf of CTA, DriveWise, and our presenters, we thank you very much for joining us. Presentation.